Roman numeral 4, Russian government links to and contacts with the Trump campaign. The office identified multiple contacts, links in the words of the appointment order, between Trump campaign officials and individuals with ties to the Russian government. The office investigated whether those contacts constituted a third avenue of attempted Russian interference with or influence on the 2016 presidential election. In particular, the investigation examined whether these contacts involved or resulted in coordination or a conspiracy with the Trump campaign and Russia, including with respect to Russia providing assistance to the campaign in exchange for any sort of favorable treatment in the future. Based on the available information, the investigation did not establish such coordination. This section describes the principal links between the Trump campaign and individuals with ties to the Russian government, including some contacts with campaign officials or associates that have been publicly reported to involve Russian contacts. Each subsection begins with an overview of the Russian contact at issue and then describes in detail the relevant facts, which are generally presented in chronological order, beginning with the early months of the campaign and extending through the post-election transition period. A. Campaign period, September 2015 through November 8, 2016. Russian government-connected individuals and media entities began showing interest in Trump's campaign in the months after he announced his candidacy in June 2015. Because Trump's status as a public figure at the time was attributable in large part to his prior business and entertainment dealings, this office investigated whether a business contact with Russia-linked individuals and entities during the campaign period, the Trump Tower Moscow Project, see Volume 1, Section 4A.1, led to or involved coordination of election assistance. Outreach from individuals with ties to Russia continued in the spring and summer of 2016, when Trump was moving toward and eventually becoming the Republican nominee for outreach to two of Trump's then recently named foreign policy advisors, including a representation that Russia had dirt on Clinton in the form of thousands of emails, dealings with a DC-based think tank that specializes in Russia and has connections with its government, a meeting at Trump Tower between the campaign and a Russian lawyer promising dirt on candidate Clinton that was, quote, part of Russia and its government's support for Trump, events at the Republican National Convention, post-convention contacts between Trump campaign officials and Russia's ambassador to the United States, and contacts through campaign chairman Paul Manafort, who had previously worked for a Russian oligarch and pro-Russian political party in Ukraine. Footnote. On August 18, 2015, on behalf of the editor-in-chief of the internet newspaper Vagliad, George Asatrian emailed campaign press secretary Hope Hicks asking for a phone or in-person candidate interview. One day earlier, the publication's founder and former president parliamentarian Konstantin Rykov had registered two Russian websites, Trump2016.ru and DonaldTrump2016.ru. No interview took place. 1. Trump Tower Moscow Project. The Trump Organization has pursued and completed projects outside the United States as part of its real estate portfolio. Some projects have involved the acquisition and ownership, through subsidiary corporate structures, of property. In other cases, the Trump Organization has executed licensing deals with real estate developers and management companies, often local to the country where the project was located. Between at least 2013 and 2016, the Trump Organization explored a similar licensing deal in Russia involving the construction of a Trump-branded property in Moscow. The project, commonly referred to as Trump Tower Moscow or Trump Moscow Project, anticipated a combination of commercial, hotel, and residential properties all within the same building. Between 2013 and June 2016, several employees of the Trump Organization, including then-president of the organization Donald J. Trump, pursued a Moscow deal with several Russian counterparties. From the fall of 2015 until the middle of 2016, Michael Cohen spearheaded the Trump Organization's pursuit of a Trump Tower Moscow project, including by reporting on the project's status to candidate Trump and other executives in the Trump Organization. A. Trump Tower Moscow venture with the Crocus Group, 2013 to 2014. The Trump Organization and the Crocus Group, a Russian real estate conglomerate owned and controlled by Aris Agalarov, began discussing a Russia-based real estate project shortly after the conclusion of the 2013 Miss Universe pageant in Moscow. Donald J. Trump Jr. served as the primary negotiator on behalf of the Trump Organization. Emin Agalarov, son of Aris Agalarov, and Irakli Ike Kavaladze represented the Crocus Group during negotiations, with the occasional assistance of Robert Goldstone. As noted in Volume 1, Section 3.D.1, in November 2018, Cohen pleaded guilty to making false statements to Congress concerning, among other things, the duration of the Trump Tower Moscow project. Footnote. Following the pageant, the Trump Organization and Mr. Agalarov's company, Crocus Group, began preliminary discussion potential real estate projects in Moscow. As has been widely reported, the Miss Universe pageant, which Trump co-owned at the time, was held in the Agalarov-owned Crocus City Hall in Moscow in November 2013. Both groups were involved in organizing the pageant, and Aris Agalarov's son, Emin, was a musical performer at the event, which Trump attended. In December 2013, Kavaladze and Trump Jr. negotiated and signed preliminary terms of an agreement for the Trump Tower Moscow project. On December 23, 2013, after discussions with Donald J. Trump, the Trump Organization agreed to accept an arrangement whereby the organization received a flat 3.5% commission on all sales, with no licensing fees or incentives. The parties negotiated a letter of intent during January and February 2014. From January 2014 through November 2014, the Trump Organization and Crocus Group discussed development plans for the Moscow project. Sometime before January 24, 2014, the Crocus Group sent the Trump Organization a proposal for an 800-unit, 194-meter building to be constructed at an Agalarov-owned site in Moscow called Crocus City, which had also been the site of the Miss Universe pageant. In February 2014, Ivanka Trump met with Emin Agalarov and toured the Crocus City site during a visit to Moscow. From March 2014 through July 2014, the groups discussed design standards and other architectural elements. For example, in July 2014, members of the Trump Organization sent Crocus Group counterparties questions about demographics of these prospective buyers in the Crocus City area, the development of neighboring parcels in Crocus City, and concepts for redesigning portions of the building. In August 2014, the Trump Organization requested specifications for a competing Marriott-branded tower being built in Crocus City. Beginning in September 2014, the Trump Organization stopped responding in a timely fashion to correspondence and proposals from the Crocus Group. Communications between the two groups continued through November 2014 with decreasing frequency. What appears to be the last communication is dated November 24, 2014. The project appears not to have developed past the planning stage and no construction occurred. B. Communications with IC Expert Investment Company and Georgy Richladze, summer and fall 2015. In late summer of 2015, the Trump Organization received a new inquiry about pursuing a Trump Tower project in Moscow. In approximately September 2015, Felix Sater, a New York-based real estate advisor, contacted Michael Cohen, then executive vice president of the Trump Organization and special counsel to Donald J. Trump. Sater had previously worked with the Trump Organization and advised it on a number of domestic and international projects. Sater had explored the possibility of a Trump Tower project in Moscow while working with the Trump Organization and therefore knew of the organization's general interest in completing a deal there. Sater had also served as an informal agent of the Trump Organization in Moscow previously and had accompanied Ivanka Trump and Donald Trump Jr. to Moscow in the mid-2000s. Sater contacted Cohen on behalf of IC Expert Investment Company, a Russian real estate development corporation controlled by Andrei Vladimirovich Rozov. Sater had known Rozov since approximately 2007, and in 2014 had served as an agent on behalf of Rozov during Rozov's purchase of a building in New York City. Sater later contacted Rozov and proposed that IC Expert pursue a Trump Tower Moscow project in which IC Expert would license the name and brand from the Trump Organization, but construct the building on its own. Sater worked on the deal with Rozov and another employee of IC Expert. Cohen was the only Trump Organization representative to negotiate directly with the IC Expert or its agents. In approximately September 2015, Cohen obtained approval to negotiate with IC Expert from candidate Trump, who was then president of the Trump Organization. Cohen provided updates directly to Trump about the project throughout 2015 and into 2016, assuring him the project was continuing. Cohen also discussed the Trump Moscow project with Ivanka Trump as to design elements, such as possible architects to use for the project, and Donald J. Trump Jr. about his experience in Moscow and possible involvement in the project during the fall of 2015. Also during the fall of 2015, Cohen communicated about the Trump Moscow proposal with Georgy Rishladze, a business executive who previously had been involved in a development deal with the Trump Organization in Batumi, Georgia. Cohen stated that he spoke to Rishladze in part because Rishladze had pursued business ventures in Moscow, including a licensing deal with the Galarov-owned Crocus Group. On September 22nd, 2015, Cohen forwarded a preliminary design study for the Trump Moscow project to Rishladze, adding, "I look forward to your reply about this spectacular project in Moscow." Rishladze forwarded Cohen's email to an associate and wrote, "If we could organize the meeting in New York at the highest level of the Russian government and Mr. Trump, this project would definitely receive the worldwide attention." On September 24, 2015, Rishladze sent Cohen an attachment that he described as a proposed letter to the mayor of Moscow from Trump.org, explaining that we need to send this letter to the mayor of Moscow, second guy in Russia. He is aware of the potential project and will pledge his support. In a second email to Cohen the same day, Rishladze provided a translation of the letter, which described the Trump Moscow project as a symbol of stronger economic, business, and cultural relationships between New York and Moscow, and therefore United States and the Russian Federation. On September 27, 2015, Rishladze sent another email to Cohen proposing that the Trump Organization partner on the Trump Moscow project with Global Development Group LLC, which he described as being controlled by Mikhail Pozykhin, a Russian architect, and Simon Nidzeradze. Cohen told the office that he ultimately declined the proposal and instead continued to work with IC Expert, the company represented by Felix Sater. C. Letter of Intent and Contacts to Russian Government, October 2015 to January 2016. 1. Trump signs the letter of intent on behalf of the Trump Organization. Between approximately October 13, 2015 and November 2, 2015, the Trump Organization, through its subsidiary Trump Acquisition LLC and IC Expert, completed a letter of intent for a Trump Moscow property. The letter of intent, signed by Trump for the Trump Organization and Rozov on behalf of IC Expert, was intended to facilitate further discussions in order to attempt to enter into a mutually acceptable agreement related to the Trump-branded project in Moscow. The letter of intent contemplated a development with residential, hotel, commercial, and office components and called for approximately 250 first-class luxury residential condominiums, as well as one first-class luxury hotel consisting of approximately 15 floors and containing not fewer than 150 hotel rooms. For the residential and commercial portions of the project, the Trump Organization would receive between 1% and 5% of all condominium sales, plus 3% of all rental and other revenue. For the project's hotel portion, the Trump Organization would receive a base fee of 3% of gross operating revenues for the first 5 years and 4% thereafter, plus a separate incentive fee of 20% of operating profit. Under the letter of intent, the Trump Organization also would receive a $4 million upfront fee prior to groundbreaking. Under these terms, the Trump Organization stood to earn substantial sums over the lifetime of the project without assuming significant liabilities or financing commitments. On November 3, 2015, the day after the Trump Organization transmitted the letter of intent, Sater emailed Cohen suggesting that the Trump Moscow project could be used to increase candidate Trump's chances at being elected, writing, "Buddy, our boy, can become president of the USA, and we can engineer it. I will get all of Putin's team to buy in on this. I will manage this process. Michael, Putin gets on stage with Donald for a ribbon cutting for Trump Moscow, and Donald owns the Republican nomination and possibly beats Hillary, and our boy is in. We will manage this process better than anyone. You and I will get Donald and Vladimir on a stage together very shortly. That the game changer." Later that day, Sater followed up. "Donald doesn't stare down. He negotiates and understands the economic issues, and Putin only wants to deal with a pragmatic leader, and a successful businessman is a good candidate for someone who knows how to negotiate. Business, politics, whatever it all is the same for someone who knows how to deal." Footnote: the letter of intent called for the Trump Organization to receive 5% of all gross sales up to $100 million, 4% of all gross sales from $100 million to $250 million, 3% of all gross sales from $250 million to $500 million, 2% of all gross sales from $500 million to $1 billion, and 1% of all gross sales over $1 billion. I think I can get Putin to say that at the Trump Moscow press conference. If he says it, we own this election. America's most difficult adversary agreeing that Donald Trump is good guy to negotiate. We can own this election. Michael, my steps are very sensitive with Putin's very, very close people. We can pull this off. Michael, let's go. 2 boys from Brooklyn getting a U.S. president elected. This is good, really good. According to Cohen, he did not consider the political import of the Trump-Moscow project to the 2016 U.S. presidential election at the time. Cohen also did not recall candidate Trump or anyone affiliated with the Trump campaign discussing the political implications of the Trump-Moscow project with him. However, Cohen recalled conversations with Trump in which the candidate suggested that his campaign would be a significant infomercial for Trump-branded properties. Lowercase Roman numeral 2. Post letter of intent contacts with individuals in Russia. Given the size of the Trump-Moscow project, Sater and Cohen believed the project required approval, whether express or implicit, from the Russian national government, including from the presidential administration of Russia. Sater stated that he therefore began to contact the presidential administration through another Russian business contact. In early negotiations with the Trump Organization, Sater had alluded to the need for governmental approval and his attempts to set up meetings with Russian officials. On October 12, 2015, for example, Sater wrote to Cohen that all we need is Putin on board and we are golden, and that a meeting with Putin and top deputy is tentatively set for the 14th of October. Redacted. This meeting was being coordinated by associates in Russia and that he had no direct interaction with the Russian government. Approximately a month later, after the letter of intent had been signed, Lena Urkova emailed Ivanka Trump on behalf of Urkova's then-husband Dmitry Klokov to offer Klokov's assistance to the Trump campaign. Klokov was at that time director of the external communications for PJSC Federal Grid Company of the Unified Energy System, a largely Russian electricity transmission company, and had been previously employed as an aide and press secretary to Russia's energy minister. Ivanka Trump forwarded the email to Cohen. He told the office that after receiving this inquiry, he had conducted an internet search for Klokov's name and concluded, incorrectly, that Klokov was a former Olympic weightlifter. Between November 18 and 19, 2015, Klokov and Cohen had at least one telephone call and exchanged several emails. Describing himself in emails to Cohen as a trusted person who could offer the campaign political synergy and synergy on a governmental level, Klokov recommended that Cohen travel to Russia to speak with him and an unidentified intermediary. Klokov said that those conversations could facilitate a later meeting in Russia between the candidate and an individual Klokov described as our person of interest. In an email to the office, Urkova later identified the person of interest as Russian President Vladimir Putin. In the telephone call and follow-on emails with Klokov, Cohen discussed his desire to use a near-term trip to Russia to do site surveys and talk over the Trump-Moscow project with local developers. Cohen registered his willingness also to meet with Klokov and the unidentified intermediary, but was emphatic that all meetings in Russia involving him or candidate Trump, including a possible meeting between candidate Trump and Putin, would need to be in conjunction with the development and an official visit with the Trump organization receiving a formal invitation to visit. Klokov had previously written that the visit by candidate Trump to Russia has to be informal. Klokov had also previously recommended to Cohen that he separate their negotiations over a possible meeting between Trump and the person of interest from any existing business track. Re-emphasizing that his outreach was not done on behalf of any business, Klokov added in a second email to Cohen that, if publicized well, such a meeting could have phenomenal impact in a business dimension, and that the person of interest's most important support could have significant ramifications for the level of projects and their capacity. Klokov concluded by telling Cohen that there was no bigger warranty in the project than the consent of the person of interest. Cohen rejected the proposal, saying that currently our LOI developer is in talks with VP's chief of staff and arranging a formal invite for the two to meet. This email appears to be their final exchange, and the investigation did not identify evidence that Cohen brought Klokov's initial offer of assistance to the campaign's attention, or that anyone associated with the Trump organization or the campaign dealt with Klokov at a later date. Cohen explained that he did not pursue the proposed meeting because he was already working on the Moscow project with Sater, who Cohen understood to have his own connections to the Russian government. By late December 2015, however, Cohen was complaining that Sater had not been able to use those connections to set up the promised meeting with Russian government officials. Cohen told Sater that he was setting up the meeting myself. On January 11, 2016, Cohen emailed the office of Dmitry Peskov, the Russian government's press secretary, indicating that he desired contact with Sergei Ivanov, Putin's chief of staff. Cohen erroneously used the email address PR_Peskova at prpress.gov.ru instead of PR_Peskova at prpress.gov.ru. So the email apparently did not go through. On January 14, 2016, Cohen emailed a different address, info@prpress.gov.ru with the following message. Dear Mr. Peskov, over the past few months I have been working with a company based in Russia regarding the development of a Trump Tower Moscow project in Moscow City. Without getting into lengthy specifics, the communications between our two sides has stalled. As this project is too important, I am hereby requesting your assistance. I respectfully request someone, preferably you, contact me so that I might discuss the specifics as well as arranging meetings with the appropriate individuals. I thank you in advance for your assistance and look forward to hearing from you soon. 2 days later, Cohen sent an email to pr_peskova@prpress.gov.ru repeating his request to speak with Sergei Ivanov. Cohen testified to Congress and initially told the office that he did not recall receiving a response to this email inquiry and that he decided to terminate any further work on the Trump Tower Moscow project as of January 2016. Cohen later admitted that these statements were false. In fact, Cohen had received and recalled receiving a response to his inquiry, and he continued to work on and update candidate Trump on the project through as late as June 2016. On January 2016, Cohen received an email from Elena Polyakova, Peskov's personal assistant. Writing from her personal account, Polyakova stated that she had been trying to reach Cohen and asked that he call her on the personal numbers that she provided. Shortly after receiving Polyakova's email, Cohen spoke to her for 20 minutes on the phone. Cohen described to Polyakova his position at the Trump Organization and outlined the proposed Trump-Moscow project, including information about the Russian counterparty with which the Trump Organization had partnered. Cohen requested assistance in moving the project forward, both in securing land to build the project and with financing. According to Cohen, Polyakova asked detailed questions and took notes, stating that she would need to follow up with others in Russia. Cohen could not recall any direct follow-up from Polyakova or any other representative of the Russian government, nor did the office identify any evidence of direct follow-up. However, the day after Cohen's call with Polyakova, Sater texted Cohen asking him to call me when you have a few minutes to chat. It's about Putin they called today. Sater then sent a draft invitation for Cohen to visit Moscow to discuss the Trump-Moscow project, along with a note to tell me if the letter is good as amended by me or make whatever changes you want and send it back to me. After a further round of edits on January 25, 2016, Sater sent Cohen an invitation, allegedly signed by Andrei Ryabinsky of the company MHJ, to travel to Moscow for a working visit about the prospects of development and construction business in Russia, the various land plots available suited for construction of this enormous tower, and the opportunity to coordinate a follow-up visit to Moscow by Mr. Donald Trump. According to Cohen, he elected not to travel at the time because of concerns about the lack of concrete proposals about land plots that could be considered as options for the project. D. Discussions about Russia travel by Michael Cohen or candidate Trump, December 2015 to June 2016. Roman numeral 1. Sater's overtures to Cohen to travel to Russia. The late January communication was neither the first nor the last time that Cohen contemplated visiting Russia in pursuit of the Trump-Moscow project. Beginning in late 2015, Sater repeatedly tried to arrange for Cohen and candidate Trump, as representatives of the Trump Organization, to travel to Russia to meet with Russian government officials and possible financing partners. In December 2015, Sater sent Cohen a number of emails about logistics for traveling to Russia for meetings. On December 19, 2015, Sater wrote, "Please call me, as I have Eventsy Dvoskin on the other line. He needs a copy of your and Donald's passports. They need a scan of every page on the passports. Invitations and visas will be issued this week by VTB Bank to discuss financing for Trump Tower Moscow. Politically, neither Putin's office nor Ministry of Foreign Affairs cannot issue invites, so they are inviting commercially/business. VTB is Russia's 2 biggest bank, and VTB Bank CEO Andrei Kostin will be at all meetings with Putin, so that it is a business meeting, not political. We will be invited to Russian consulate this week to receive invite and have visa issued. In response, Cohen texted Sater an image of his own passport. Cohen told the office that at one point he requested a copy of candidate Trump's passport from Rona Graff, Trump's executive assistant at the Trump Organization, and that Graff later brought Trump's passport to Cohen's office. The investigation did not, however, establish that the passport was forwarded to Sater. In the spring of 2016, Sater and Cohen continued to discuss a trip to Moscow in connection with the Trump Moscow project. On April 20th, 2016, Sater wrote Cohen, "The people wanted to know when you are coming." On May 4th, Sater followed up, "I had a chat with Moscow. Assuming the trip does happen, the question is before or after the convention. I said I believe, but I don't know for sure that it's probably after the convention. Obviously, the pre-meeting trip, you only, can happen anytime you want, but the two big guys were the question. I said I would confirm and revert. Let me know if I was right by saying I believe after Cleveland, and also when you want to speak to them and possibly fly over." Cohen responded, "My trip before Cleveland. Trump once he becomes the nominee after the convention." The day after this exchange, Sater tied Cohen's travel to Russia to the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, an annual event attended by prominent Russian politicians and businessmen. Sater told the office that he was informed by a business associate that Peskov wanted to invite Cohen to the forum. On May 5th, 2016, Sater wrote to Cohen, "Peskov would like to invite you as his guest to the St. Petersburg Forum, which is Russia's Davos. It's June 16 to 19. He wants to meet there with you and possibly introduce you to either Putin or Medvedev, as they are not sure if I or both will be there. This is perfect. The entire business class of Russia will be there as well. He said anything you want to discuss, including dates and subjects, are on the table to discuss." The following day, Sater asked Cohen to confirm those dates would work for him to travel. Cohen wrote back, "Works for me." On June 9th, 2016, Sater sent Cohen a notice that he, Sater, was completing the badges for the forum, adding, "Putin is there on the 17th. Very strong chance you will meet him as well." On June 13th, 2016, Sater forwarded Cohen an invitation to the forum signed by the director of the Roscongress Foundation, the Russian entity organizing the forum. Sater also sent Cohen a Russian visa application and asked him to send 2 passport photos. According to Cohen, the invitation gave no indication that Peskov had been involved in inviting him. Cohen was concerned that Russian officials were not actually involved or were not interested in meeting with him, as Sater had alleged, so he decided not to go to the forum. On June 14, 2016, Cohen met with Sater in the lobby of Trump Tower in New York and informed him that he would not be traveling at that time. Roman numeral 2, candidate Trump's opportunities to travel to Russia. The investigation identified evidence that during the period the Trump Moscow project was under consideration, the possibility of candidate Trump visiting Russia arose in 2 contexts. First, in interviews with the office, Cohen stated that he's discussed the subject of traveling to Russia with Trump twice, once in late 2015 and again in spring 2016. According to Cohen, Trump indicated a willingness to travel if it would assist the project significantly. On one occasion, Trump told Cohen to speak with then campaign manager Corey Lewandowski to coordinate the candidate's schedule. Cohen recalled that he spoke with Lewandowski, who suggested that they speak again when Cohen had actual dates to evaluate. Cohen indicated, however, that he knew that travel prior to the Republican National Convention would be impossible given the candidate's pre-existing commitments to the campaign. Second, like Cohen, Trump received and turned down an invitation to the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. In late December 2015, Mira Duma, a contact of Ivanka Trump's from the fashion industry, first passed along invitations for Ivanka Trump and candidate Trump from Sergei Prikodko, a deputy prime minister of the Russian Federation. On January 14, 2016, Rona Graf sent an email to Duma stating that Trump was honored to be asked to participate in the highly prestigious forum event, but that he would have to decline the invitation given his very grueling and full travel schedule as a presidential candidate. Graf asked Duma whether she recommended that Graf send a formal note to the deputy prime minister declining his invitation. Duma replied that a formal note would be great. It does not appear that Graf prepared that note immediately. According to written answers from President Trump, Graf received an email from Deputy Prime Minister Prikodko on March 17, 2016, again inviting Trump to participate in the 2016 forum in St. Petersburg. 2 weeks later, on March 31, 2016, Graf prepared for Trump's signature on a 2-paragraph letter declining the invitation. The letter stated that Trump's schedule has become extremely demanding because of the presidential campaign, that he already had several commitments in the United States for the time of the forum, but that he otherwise would have gladly given every consideration to attending such an important event. Graf forwarded the letter to another executive assistant at the Trump Organization with instructions to print the document on letterhead for Trump to sign. At approximately the same time that the letter was being prepared, Robert Forsman, a New York-based investment banker, began reaching out to Graf to secure an in-person meeting with candidate Trump. According to Forsman, he had been asked by Anton Kobiakov, a Russian presidential aide involved with the Roscongress Foundation, to see if Trump could speak at the forum. Forsman first emailed Graf on March 31, 2016, following a phone introduction brokered through Trump business associate Mark Burnett, who produced the television show The Apprentice. In his email, Forsman referenced his long-standing personal and professional expertise in Russia and Ukraine, his work setting up an early private channel between Vladimir Putin and former U.S. President George W. Bush, and an approach he had received from senior Kremlin officials about the candidate. Forsman asked Graf for a meeting with the candidate, Corey Lewandowski, or another relevant person, to discuss this and other concrete things Forsman felt uncomfortable discussing over unsecure email. On April 4, 2016, Graf forwarded Forsman's meeting request to Jessica Mashia, another executive assistant to Trump. With no response forthcoming, Forsman twice sent reminders to Graf, first on April 26 and again on April 30, 2016. Graf sent an apology to Forsman and forwarded his April 26th email, as well as his initial March 2016 email, to Lewandowski. On May 2, 2016, Graf forwarded Forsman's April 30th email, which suggested an alternative meeting with Donald Trump Jr. or Eric Trump so that Forsman could convey to them information that should be conveyed to the candidate personally or to someone the candidate absolutely trusts, to policy advisor Stephen Mueller. No communications or other evidence obtained by the office indicate that the Trump campaign learned that Forsman was reaching out to invite the candidate to the forum, or that the campaign otherwise followed up with Forsman until after the election, when he interacted with the transition team as he pursued a possible position in the incoming administration. When interviewed by the office, Forsman denied this specific approach from senior Kremlin officials noted in his March 31, 2016 email was anything other than Kobiakov's invitation to Roscongress. According to Forsman, the concrete things he referenced in the same email were a combination of the invitation itself, Forsman's personal perspectives on the invitation and Russia policy in general, and details of a Ukraine plan supported by a U.S. think tank, East-West Institute. Forsman told the office that Kobiakov had extended similar invitations through him to another Republican presidential candidate and one other politician. Forsman also said that Kobiakov had asked Forsman to invite Trump to speak after that other presidential candidate withdrew from the race and the other politicians' participation did not work out. Finally, Forsman claimed to have no plans to establish a back channel involving Trump, stating the reference to his involvement in the Bush-Putin back channel was meant to burnish his credentials to the campaign. Forsman commented that he had not recognized any of the experts announced as Trump's foreign policy team in March 2016 and wanted to secure an in-person meeting with the candidate to share his professional background and policy views, including that Trump should decline Kobyakov's invitation to speak at the forum. 2. George Papadopoulos. George Papadopoulos was a foreign policy advisor to the Trump campaign from March 2016 to early October 2016. In late April 2016, Papadopoulos was told by London-based professor Joseph Mifsud, immediately after Mifsud's return from a trip to Moscow, that the Russian government had obtained dirt on candidate Clinton in the form of thousands of emails. 1 week later, on May 6, 2016, Papadopoulos suggested to a representative of a foreign government that the Trump campaign had received indications from the Russian government that it could assist the campaign through the anonymous release of information that would be damaging to candidate Clinton. Papadopoulos shared information about Russian dirt with people outside of the campaign, and the office investigated whether he also provided it to a campaign official. Papadopoulos and the campaign officials with whom he interacted told the office that they did not recall that Papadopoulos passed them the information. Throughout the relevant period of time and for several months thereafter, Papadopoulos worked with Mifsud and 2 Russian nationals to arrange a meeting between the campaign and the Russian government. That meeting never came to pass. A. Origins of campaign work. In March 2016, Papadopoulos became a foreign policy advisor to the Trump campaign. As early as the summer of 2015, he had sought a role as a policy advisor to the campaign. But in a September 30th, 2015 email, he was told that the campaign was not hiring policy advisors. In late 2015, Papadopoulos obtained a paid position on the campaign of Republican presidential candidate Ben Carson. Although Carson remained in the presidential race until early March 2016, Papadopoulos had stopped actively working for his campaign by early February 2016. At that time, Papadopoulos reached out to a contact at the London Centre of International Law Practice, which billed itself as a unique institution comprising high-level professional international law practitioners dedicated to the advancement of global legal knowledge and the practice of international law. Papadopoulos said that he had finished his role with the Carson campaign and asked if LCILP was hiring. In early February, Papadopoulos agreed to join LCILP and arrived in London to begin work. As he was taking his position at LCILP, Papadopoulos contacted Trump campaign manager Corey Lewandowski via LinkedIn and emailed campaign official Michael Glassner about his interest in joining the Trump campaign. On March 2, 2016, Papadopoulos sent Glassner another message reiterating his interest. Glassner passed along word of Papadopoulos' interest to another campaign official, Joy Lutz, who notified Papadopoulos by email that she had been told by Glassner to introduce Papadopoulos to Sam Clovis, the Trump campaign's national co-chair and chief policy advisor. At the time of Papadopoulos' March 2nd email, the media was criticizing the Trump campaign for lack of experienced foreign policy or national security advisors within its ranks. To address that issue, senior campaign officials asked Clovis to put a foreign policy team together on short notice. After receiving Papadopoulos' name from Lutz, Clovis performed a Google search on Papadopoulos, learned that he had worked at the Hudson Institute, and believed that he had credibility on energy issues. On March 3, 2016, Clovis arranged to speak with Papadopoulos by phone to discuss Papadopoulos joining the campaign as a foreign policy advisor, and on March 6, 2016, the two spoke. Papadopoulos recalled that Russia was mentioned as a topic, and he understood from the conversation that Russia would be an important aspect of the campaign's foreign policy. At the end of the conversation, Clovis offered Papadopoulos a role as foreign policy advisor to the campaign, and Papadopoulos accepted the offer. B. Initial Russia-related contacts. Approximately a week after signing on as foreign policy advisor, Papadopoulos traveled to Rome, Italy as part of his duties with LCILP. The purpose of this trip was to meet officials affiliated with Link Campus University, a for-profit institution headed by a former Italian government official. During the visit, Papadopoulos was introduced to Joseph Mifsud. Mifsud is a Maltese national who worked as a professor at the London Academy of Diplomacy in London, England. Although Mifsud worked out of London and was also affiliated with LCILP, the encounter in Rome was the first time that Papadopoulos met him. Mifsud maintained various Russian contacts while living in London, as described further below. Among his contacts was Redacted, a one-time employee of the IRA, the entity that carried out the Russian social media campaign. In January and February 2016, Mifsud and Redacted discussed Redacted possibly meeting in Russia. The investigation did not identify evidence of them meeting. Later in the spring of 2016, Redacted was also in contact with Redacted that was linked to an employee of the Russian Ministry of Defense, and that account had overlapping contacts with a group of Russian military-controlled Facebook accounts that included accounts used to promote the DC Leaks releases in the course of the GRU's hack and release operations. According to Papadopoulos, Mifsud at first seemed uninterested in Papadopoulos when they met in Rome. After Papadopoulos informed Mifsud about his role in the Trump campaign, however, Mifsud appeared to take greater interest in Papadopoulos. The two discussed Mifsud's European and Russian contacts and had a general discussion about Russia. Mifsud also offered to introduce Papadopoulos to European leaders and others with contacts to the Russian government. Papadopoulos told the office that Mifsud's claim of substantial connections with the Russian government officials interested Papadopoulos, who thought that such connections could increase his importance as a policy advisor to the Trump campaign. On March 17, 2016, Papadopoulos returned to London. 4 days later, candidate Trump publicly named him as a member of the Foreign Policy and National Security Advisory Team chaired by Senator Jeff Sessions, describing Papadopoulos as an oil and energy consultant and an excellent guy. On March 24, 2016, Papadopoulos met with Mifsud in London. Mifsud was accompanied by a Russian female named Olga Polonskaya. Mifsud introduced Polonskaya as a former student of his who had connections to Vladimir Putin. Papadopoulos understood at the time that Polonskaya may have been Putin's niece, but later learned that was not true. During the meeting, Polonskaya offered to help Papadopoulos establish contacts in Russia and stated that the Russian ambassador in London was a friend of hers. Based on this interaction, Papadopoulos expected Mifsud and Polonskaya to introduce him to the Russian ambassador in London, but that did not occur. Following his meeting with Mifsud, Papadopoulos sent an email to members of the Trump campaign's foreign policy advisory team. The subject of the message was, "Meeting with Russian leadership, including Putin." The message stated in part, "I just finished a very productive lunch with a good friend of mine, Joseph Mifsud, the director of the London Academy of Diplomacy, who introduced me to both Putin's niece and the Russian ambassador in London, who also acts as the deputy foreign minister. The topic of the lunch was to arrange a meeting between us and the Russian leadership to discuss U.S.-Russia ties under President Trump. They are keen to host us in a neutral city or directly in Moscow. They said the leadership, including Putin, is ready to meet with us, and Mr. Trump, should there be interest. Waiting for everyone's thoughts on moving forward with this very important issue." Papadopoulos' message came at a time when Clovis perceived a shift in the campaign's approach towards Russia. from one of engaging with Russia through the NATO framework and taking a strong stance on Russia aggression in Ukraine, redacted. Clovis's response to Papadopoulos, however, did not reflect that shift. Replying to Papadopoulos and other members of the Foreign Policy Advisory team copied on the initial email, Clovis wrote, "This is most informative. Let me work it through the campaign. No commitments until we see how this plays out. My thought is that we probably should not go forward with any meetings with the Russians until we have had occasion to sit with our NATO allies, especially France, Germany, and Great Britain. We need to reassure our allies that we are not going to advance anything with Russia until we have everyone on the same page. More thoughts later today. Great work." C. March 31st Foreign Policy Team Meeting. The campaign held a meeting of the Foreign Policy Advisory Team with Senator Sessions and candidate Trump approximately 1 week later on March 31st, 2016 in Washington, D.C. The meeting, which was intended to generate press coverage for the campaign, took place at the Trump International Hotel. Papadopoulos flew to Washington for this event. At the meeting, Senator Sessions sat at one end of the oval table while Trump sat at the other. As reflected in the photograph below, which was posted to Trump's Instagram account, Papadopoulos sat between the two seats to Sessions' left. During the meeting, each of the newly announced foreign policy advisors introduced themselves and briefly described their areas of expertise or experience. Papadopoulos spoke about his previous work in the energy sector and then brought up a potential meeting with Russian officials. Specifically, Papadopoulos told the group that he had learned through his contacts in London that Putin wanted to meet with candidate Trump and that these connections could help arrange that meeting. Trump and Sessions both reacted to Papadopoulos' statement. Papadopoulos and campaign advisor J.D. Gordon, who told investigators in an interview that he had a crystal clear recollection of the meeting, have stated that Trump was interested in and receptive to the idea of meeting with Putin. Papadopoulos understood Sessions to be similarly supportive of his efforts to arrange a meeting. Gordon and 2 other attendees, however, recall that Sessions generally opposed the proposal, though they differ in their accounts of the concerns he voiced or the strength of the opposition that he expressed. D. George Papadopoulos learns that Russia has dirt in the form of Clinton emails. Whatever Sessions' precise words at the March 31st meeting, Papadopoulos did not understand Sessions or anyone else in the Trump campaign to have directed that he refrain from making further efforts to arrange a meeting between the campaign and the Russian government. To the contrary, Papadopoulos told the office that he understood the campaign to be supportive of his efforts to arrange such a meeting. Accordingly, when he returned to London, Papadopoulos resumed those efforts. Throughout April 2016, Papadopoulos continued to correspond with, meet with, and seek Russia contacts through Mifsud and at times Polonskaya. For example, within a week of her initial March 24 meeting with him, Polonskaya attempted to send Papadopoulos a text message, which email exchanges show to have been drafted or edited by Mifsud, addressing Papadopoulos' wish to engage with the Russian Federation. When Papadopoulos learned from Mifsud that Polonskaya had tried to message him, he sent her an email seeking another meeting. Polonskaya responded the next day that she was back in St. Petersburg, but would be very pleased to support Papadopoulos' initiatives between our two countries and to meet him again. Papadopoulos stated in reply that he thought a good step would be to introduce him to the Russian ambassador in London and that he would like to talk to the ambassador or anyone else you recommend about a potential foreign policy trip to Russia. Mifsud, who had been copied on the email exchanges, replied on the morning of April 11th, 2016. He wrote, "This is already been agreed. I am flying to Moscow on the 18th for a Valdy meeting plus other meetings at the Duma. We will talk tomorrow." The two bodies referenced by Mifsud are part of or associated with the Russian government. The Duma is a Russian legislative assembly, while the Valdy refers to the Valdy Discussion Club, a Moscow-based group that is close to Russia's foreign policy establishment. Papadopoulos thanked Mifsud and said that he would see him tomorrow. For her part, Poliskaya responded that she had already alerted my personal links to our conversation and your request, that we are all very excited about the possibility of a good relationship with Mr. Trump, and that the Russian Federation would love to welcome him once his candidature would be officially announced. Papadopoulos' and Mifsud's mentions of seeing each other tomorrow referenced a meeting that the two had scheduled for the next morning, April 12, 2016, at the Andaz Hotel in London. Papadopoulos acknowledged the meeting during interviews with the office, and records from Papadopoulos' UK cell phone and his internet search history all indicate that the meeting took place. Following the meeting, Mifsud traveled as planned to Moscow. On April 18, 2016, while in Russia, Mifsud introduced Papadopoulos over email to Ivan Timofeyev, a member of the Russian International Affairs Council. Mifsud had described Timofeyev as having connections with the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the executive entity in Russia responsible for Russian foreign relations. Over the next several weeks, Papadopoulos and Timofeyev had multiple conversations over Skype and email about setting the groundwork for a potential meeting between the campaign and Russian government officials. Papadopoulos told the office that on one Skype call, he believed his conversation with Timofeyev was being monitored or supervised by an unknown third party because Timofeyev spoke in an official manner and Papadopoulos heard odd noises on the line. Timofeyev also told Papadopoulos in an April 25, 2016 email that he had just spoken to Igor Ivanov, the president of RIAC and former foreign minister of Russia, and conveyed Ivanov's advice on how to best arrange a Moscow visit. After a stop in Rome, Mifsud returned to England on April 25, 2016. The next day, Papadopoulos met Mifsud for breakfast at the Andaz Hotel, the same location as their last meeting. During that meeting, Mifsud told Papadopoulos that he had met with high-level Russian government officials during his recent trip to Moscow. Mifsud also said that on the trip, he learned that Russians had obtained dirt on candidate Hillary Clinton. As Papadopoulos later stated to the FBI, Mifsud said that the dirt was in the form of emails of Clinton and that they have thousands of emails. On May 6, 2016, 10 days after that meeting with Mifsud, Papadopoulos suggested to a representative of a foreign government that the Trump campaign had received indications from the Russian government that it could assist the campaign through the anonymous release of information that would be damaging to Hillary Clinton.